Everyone's afraid of something. The dentist, taxes, the dark, even broccoli. Yuck. We all have something that keeps us up at night. And honestly, some things are scary. The good news is that with God, we don't have to be as afraid. With God on our side, we can fear less.
Today marks the halfway point of a worship series that is looking at ways we can better manage the fears we face in life. Our goal is not to help you get to a place where you have no fears or anxieties. That is not realistic. This isn't about being fearless. It is about learning how to fear less. It is about how we turn down the fears and anxieties of life so that we can live more abundantly. Our topic for this morning is the fear of loneliness. It's important to remember that loneliness is not being alone. These are two very different things. While I play an extrovert on Sundays, I am an introvert by nature. I need to be alone on a regular basis to maintain my emotional health and well-being. And whether you are introverted or not, being alone sometimes can be a good thing. Loneliness is different. Loneliness is rarely, if ever, good. Loneliness is an ache, an emptiness, a deep longing, and once you experience it, you know it is one of the most powerful emotions a person can have. One of the many challenging things about loneliness is that you can experience it even when you are surrounded by other people. Loneliness isn't just about not being around others. It is about not having meaningful and life-giving connections with people. Loneliness can strike anyone at any time for any number of reasons, and it can lead to anxiety, depression, and hopelessness, especially when the person experiencing it thinks it might go on for some time into the future, maybe even for the remainder of their life. And the impacts of loneliness aren't just emotional. Studies show that there is a physical impact from loneliness. One such study looked at cardiovascular disease and included loneliness as a risk factor alongside more recognized factors like smoking. They discovered that deficiencies in social relationships were found to increase the risk of developing coronary heart disease and stroke by around 30%. Another study showed that loneliness increases a person's risk of functional decline by 60%, as well as bringing a 45% increased risk of premature death. So when it comes to loneliness, our fears of it are well-founded. Not just for the emotional impact it can have, but for the ways it can affect our physical health as well. Humans are communal creatures. We not only need relationships with other people to thrive, but we also need them to survive. One of the reasons it is so important for us to be talking about this is the fact that there are many people who refer to what's happening right now in our nation as an epidemic of loneliness. Cigna Health has been tracking the rates of loneliness and its impact on people living in the U.S. for several years. Their latest study, completed in 2022, shows just how much of an issue this is becoming. 58% of U.S. adults are considered lonely. Although that number in and of itself is enough to get our attention, the study shows that while loneliness impacts a broad range of people, there are subgroups where things are even more concerning. People from underrepresented racial groups are more likely to be lonely. 75% of Hispanics and 68% of Blacks and African Americans are classified as lonely. People with lower incomes are lonelier than those with higher incomes. 63% of adults earning less than $50,000 per year are classified as lonely. 53% of those earning more than $50,000 a year are lonely. Young adults are twice as likely to be lonely than seniors. 79% of adults aged 18 to 24 report feeling lonely, compared to 41% of people over 65. When this stat is given, some people think the difference is due to social media. While that may be part of the issue, rates of loneliness among social media users are only 2 points higher than people who have never used social media. So we need to be careful about placing the blame there. Also, those of you who know and care for people in that age group, check in on them and let them know how much they are loved. About 65% of parents and guardians are classified as lonely. This is 10 points higher than non-parents. 69% of mothers are experiencing loneliness, which is 7 points higher than the rate of fathers. 77% of single parents are struggling with loneliness. These and other statistics make it clear that even though our world is becoming more and more connected in a lot of ways, too many of us are becoming disconnected from other people, and we are suffering the consequences. I am going to offer some ways we might reduce our risks and our fears of loneliness in just a moment. But I want to say a couple of things first. If you are feeling lonely, try to remember that you are not the only person feeling that way. There are so many others who are experiencing the same thing. That might not be of much comfort, but it can help us from feeling like there's something uniquely wrong with us, like everyone else has this figured out. That is not the case. Loneliness is pervasive, and it can be hard to overcome. Also, being lonely can be frightening and at times overwhelming. It can bring about feelings of hopelessness. If you ever get to the place where those feelings start overwhelming you, please contact a mental health professional. If you aren't sure how to take the first step or where to turn, contact a staff member here at Middletown Christian. We can get you connected with someone who can provide the help you need and deserve. The good news when it comes to loneliness is that there are some ways that we can reduce our risk of experiencing it. And in so doing, we can reduce our fears around it. While you likely know a lot of this stuff already, here are some things the studies suggest when it comes to dealing with loneliness. First, spend time with others. I know it sounds obvious, but it needs to be said. It also needs to be recognized that for some people, spending time with others is easier said than done. There can be multiple dynamics involved here, and they may need to be worked through. However, we all need to spend time with other people. For some of us, this will take work. We will have to lean into the effort to build relationships, but it is key to our health and well-being. Get appropriate amounts of sleep. While everyone's need for sleep is different, studies show that those who say they sleep just the right amount have lower loneliness scores than those who say they slept too much. In fact, the more a person overslept, the greater their likelihood for loneliness and disconnection. Exercise appropriately. People who say they get the right amount of exercise are considerably less likely to be lonely. Keep a balanced work life. Those who say they work the right amount are least likely to be lonely. The more you overwork or underwork, the more likely it is you will feel disconnected and lonely. Prepare for relationships in retirement. The leading indicator of happiness in retirement is not the level of one's 401k or pension plan. It is the number of significant relationships a person carries into retirement. In the same way that we are planning our financial futures, we need to be planning our relationship future. Monitor the use of social media and technology. While loneliness rates are generally the same for people who use social media as those who don't, there are ways that social media and technology usage can impact our mental health and well-being. So we have to monitor our use of it carefully so that we don't fall into any bad habits. In addition to these steps, our faith can also help reduce our fears and experiences of loneliness. The first thing to remember is that God never meant for humans to be alone or to experience loneliness. At the very beginning of the Bible, in the opening chapters of Genesis, there are two accounts of creation. And while there are some significant differences between them, one thing is clear. God wants humans to be in relationships with other humans. In fact, throughout the process of creation, God kept looking down on what had been made and calling it all good. But when God saw that Adam was alone, God said, "That is not good." So from the very beginning of the human story, we have needed community. We have needed connections with other people. It's how we were created. One of the things God gave us so that we would have this kind of community is the church, the gathering, the congregation of people who share their belief in God and walk with each other through all of life's varied circumstances. The church is meant to be a place where people can come together and share the journey. That is one of the many reasons that I believe our inclusive welcome of all people is so Christ-like and important. When a person feels rejected by the church for any reason, they can feel rejected by God. That sense of rejection can lead to a deep spiritual loneliness. We have been tasked by God with loving one another and welcoming others, helping them find a true place of belonging, something that not only eases isolation and loneliness, but it may also save lives. If you are looking for community, please remember to look here, look to the church to find ways to plug in and get engaged. And if other churches have told you that you are not welcome, please know that there is a place for you at our table. Finally, I want to remind you of the relationship each of us can have with God and with Jesus. I'm not talking about some kind of sappy faith that magically solves all of our problems because of our personal relationship with Jesus. I'm talking about a deep and abiding faith in a God who is always with us, a God who loves us, a God who made us in their image. While we all clearly need earthly relationships, I believe there will always be something missing if we don't have a real relationship with God. I love what St. Augustine said about that. "Thou hast made us for thyself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it finds rest in thee." Developing a sense of connection with God can turn down the fears of loneliness by reminding us of our eternal connection to God and the meaningful place we have as God's children. I want to close with these words written about God's presence in our lives by King David. "Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast." While these words may not immediately ease our fears and experiences of loneliness, they can serve as a reminder that we are loved, we are worthy, and we are never alone. Amen.